So we can experience sex, sensuality, pleasure through various channels. And so one is sensation, and that's one of the channels. And we kind of think like, oh, that's what it all is. It's all about sensation. There's also thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
It can be like we could just talk about something. We could, and you can. That's why you can like take and read a book, and
Yeah.
it can be sexy. There's image.
Mm-hmm.
We can experience through image. It can be just like a play in our mind. It can be a story.
Mm-hmm.
This is where role play and like pretend, and that can be, so which channel is your main channel? So we have all of these channels.
Mm-hmm.
So start to knowing what is your main channel, what is a channel you don't know at all that you could expand.
Hello and welcome to the Stoner Story Witch podcast. My name is Kristyn, and I am grateful to be hosting this podcast on the lands of the Chorotega people, colonially known as Costa Rica. I am really excited for today's episode, where I sit down with my friend and colleague, Marisa Sullivan. Marisa Sullivan is a radical visionary and pioneer in the field of holistic womb health, fusing ancient wisdom with modern method. She is a yoga therapist with over 30 years experience, tantrika, sexual educator, and Reiki master. She is also the proud mother of a college-aged daughter. As a sexual trauma survivor, Marisa learned firsthand the power of movement and pleasure as medicine. The practice of asana helped her re-inhabit her own body, and the study of sacred sexuality allowed her to begin her healing journey. Marisa's work is founded on the practices of embodiment and presence. Marisa's own self-care includes aligning with joy through ritual, journaling, and movement. She is dedicated to releasing whatever holds her back from serving the highest good. She offers group classes, custom coaching, personal care support, and mentorship with the intention of meeting folks where they are along their sexual health and pleasure journey. And she also is a guide on the Numinous Network with Carmen Spaniola that I know I've mentioned a handful of times on probably every single episode. It could be a drinking game at this point, probably, or like, I don't know how many times I mentioned Carmen Spaniola, but it really is a really great place to be practicing some of the things that Marisa and I talk about in this episode. So I, as always, invite you to join me there, and you can check out more about Marisa, the links that I post in the show notes. But her website is marisasullivanhealing.com. Anyway, Marisa came onto the show to discuss the show Bad Sisters, season 1. I know season 2 came out. I have purposefully not watched it because I am still in my feelings and processing season 1. I cannot just like put more in until I process what needs to come out. So I invited Marisa to come on to discuss themes of pleasure and how patriarchy robs not just women, but in this show it is, women of their pleasure. And like, what can we do about it? What does it look like to own our pleasure as an act of resistance, as a necessary part of the revolution? So given that is the topic that we are discussing, there is certainly a content warning around just like sexual health, relationships to our bodies, even histories of sexual assault or lack of proper consent. So as always, let's take care of ourselves. And I invite you to turn off at any time or just stop listening. And also, we will be discussing this through the lens of Bad Sisters season 1. So there will be some spoilers. There will be spoilers. So if you are sensitive to spoilers and you have not yet watched Bad Sisters season 1 and would like to do so, I invite you to take a pause and tend to that. And I guess I should also add for a content warning that we do share some of our own personal experiences of like the difficulty of trying to pursue and practice pleasure. And I share all of this because there is a younger part of me, or an older part, I guess, depending on how you think about it, that can imagine feeling scandalized, learning, someone's personal sex life, details of their sexual history. I'm not sure. So only compassion if that feels like that might be true for you. And again, you can stop listening at any time, but I just wanted to offer that in case that's just something that you're thinking like, I don't know that I need to know personal details of these two people, of the harms of the patriarchy in their life, and what their pleasure practices are. Like, that's perfectly fine. And this episode is not for you. And I hope you find something else you enjoy, I guess, on another episode. Thanks for stopping by. All right, so I want to take this time to give a little synopsis of Bad Sisters Season 1 so that if you haven't watched it and you're not planning to, and you just like want to kind of, be in on it, hopefully it'll equip you to be able to follow along with our conversation. Or if you haven't watched it in a while and like don't have capacity, I got you covered. Okay, so I also just want to, I'll put a link in the show notes, but thanks to Collider.com for providing a recap that I could just kind of add my little edits and like kind of, it was nice to not have to reinvent the wheel. I'm so glad I discovered recaps on the internet. Go figure. Okay, so Bad Sisters Season 1, just what you need to know to follow along. Obviously, there are details that are left out because this isn't a recap podcast. So in the beginning, it is very clear to us that this man, John Paul, he goes by JP, and he is the husband of Grace, is a pretty bad dude. Okay, we see over and over him insulting Grace and her 4 sisters, and it's like more than insults. He's obviously just a very toxic person in this family system. When Grace isn't around, the sisters joke about how it wouldn't be so bad if John Paul died and how they could kill him. And in the present day, we see like that it is revealed that John Paul has died, and there's kind of this like, there continues to be a mystery as far as like, could the sisters have been involved in his death? Because each episode features these flashbacks where the sisters, totally unbeknownst to Grace, come up with these schemes of how they could murder their brother-in-law, John Paul. And every attempt, which I'll get into each one a little bit here just because I think there's so much to it. Every attempt essentially fails, with John Paul being free to continue tormenting them. And I just want to take a moment because I do think it's important. Let's texture out who these sisters are. So we have Grace. Grace is the wife of John Paul, or JP, and he controls her as well as their daughter. He is adamant that she only stays home, that like, we need you at home. He demeans her desire to try art and dance classes. He is just this run-of-the-mill gaslighting guy. He's withholding affection and attunement from her while she has to constantly walk on eggshells around him. He weaponizes contact nutrition to manipulate her into missing her annual Christmas swim with her sisters, this like tradition they do every year since, or maybe even before their parents died. There's this trauma that all of them have, that their parents died when they were really young and the older sister kind of had to raise them. Anyway, John Paul takes advantage of this. We see this scene, and I just think this encapsulates so much about him. So that's why I'm just offering one little nugget, but he has got a receipt list of issues that we could go into. But we see that his daughter is like, oh, mom's getting ready to go for the Christmas swim. So he like brings her a tray of oysters and a glass of champagne. And he's weaponizing this contact nutrition that he like wants to be with her. He's like giving her these like kind eyes, and like she's so starved for attention and affection from this man, and he's showering it onto her. But then when they're done, she like grabs her towel and she's ready to leave. And he starts shaming her for, being so foolish as to risking her safety by getting in a car after drinking one glass of champagne. And it's like, he totally knew what he was doing. Like he is purposefully trying to keep her away from her sisters. I think I mentioned he withholds sex from her. He says that he, has trouble getting it up, but it's also pretty obvious that he has like a decent self-pleasure practice with his computer and his hand. And then, when he then finds a sex toy that Grace's sister gave her, he shames her for it, blames her for him not desiring her. This, like, dear listener, it is tough to watch in some ways, right? Nobody wants anyone they love to be married to someone like JP. Even if, and there's this one funny line that when he's particularly like jackassy to her in front of her sisters, she makes a comment to that, well, hey, I haven't had to take out the bin in 10 years. And I just like want to hold compassion for like the things that, you know, the parts of me that would be like, well, hey, at least I don't have to take out the bin, you know, once a week for the last 10 years, as if that makes like living with an absolute, you know, tormentor worth it. Anyway, I'm going to have a little stretch because that was so hard watching that, just like reviewing that. Oh, but we feel for it. And I will be having follow-up conversations with some folks around Zon Valine's work, which I will link to in the show notes, because she has a podcast on a Substack that I really enjoy about liberating motherhood, and so many resources and so many essays. So I invite us all for that. Okay, so that was Grace. The other sister, or one of the other sisters, is Eva. Eva is the oldest sister. She kind of raised all of them. It's not really certain what exactly the age gap is. But there is it's revealed to us in the very, very last episode of the finale that JP actually raped Eva 10 years previously, and she ended up miscarrying. I wasn't really sure like if that was like he was the father of that baby. She was in a different relationship that we know about anyway, but we know that she has struggled with infertility ever since that rape. She was drunk at the time of the rape, so felt alone and ashamed despite her closeness with her sisters. She never actually told any of them. So like, just again, holding with compassion that like we throughout this entire show see how close these sisters are. They're like such a great little community. This amazing family, and yeah, just the sadness of like the realization that like she didn't throw to any one of them for support through that. I'll get to it, but she also has what they talk about having had a breakdown, and it was as a result of that. And so like, oh, you know, she had to go to rehab. There was like this story about, you know, how this like kind of shameful story of her breakdown and like her stint in rehab, and we're like, oh, it's JP's fault. And in case it's not clear, JP is just the personification of patriarchy. So like it is patriarchy's fault that, you know, women are you know, pathologized in these ways, right? And stigmatized. So just holding that, holding it to let it go. Whatever feels right. Anyway, okay. JP also works at the same company as Eva, and when he finds out that she is trying for a promotion, he ends up putting his hat in the ring as well, and then planting, you know, that idea of Eva as an alcoholic in their boss's head, right? JP tells the boss about her breakdown years earlier. That again, you know, we find out later. It's like we don't even realize at the time just how shitty it is. It's later that we realize like kind of what all the factors that went into that, you know, quote unquote breakdown. JP ends up getting the promotion because of course. He becomes her boss because of course. And then he is taking even more power from her. He's citing how clients are complaining that she smells like booze. Whether that's true or not, I don't actually know. We do see her drinking a lot. And I think a lot of, again, how we criminalize and demonize substance use when it is her coping strategy. She's not told her sisters, like she is holding a lot. And we don't see it, you know, we can hold it with compassion as a coping strategy. Maybe it's not, you know, the healthiest way to cope. But he is such an asshole and she needs assistance and resourcing from any means necessary. So, yeah, I especially hate that he is like adding to the stress that's leading her to drink, and then, weaponizing her coping strategy. That just makes so much sense. Okay. Whew. Then we have BB, and BB and Eva are actually the first murder attempt is Eva and BB. And so BB's story, like how she's impacted by the patriarchy via John Paul, is that JP, years before the events of the show, we know the parents were killed in a car accident, and we see that years before the show, BB like called JP for a ride. She needed a ride somewhere, and like all three of her taxis that she had called had canceled on her, and she just like needed to be somewhere. That's really all the context you need. And it was kind of rainy. Maybe the weather was bad. Even though their parents weren't killed in a car accident, he decides to like be driving super recklessly, and then kind of like mocking her when she's like, can you please slow down? Can you please stop swerving so much? Actually, can you just let me out? Like, okay, never mind. I would rather be in the rain and have you just like, I need out. Like, and he's just like, oh, come on. It's not a big, it's like that. We get it. We know that. Like, I'm just joking. Like, you're fucking Christ. So, they end up getting in a car accident, and she ends up losing her eye. He has this like hood ornament that he has in his car, and and that will be relevant later. But yeah, she very much is still very upset by that incident, and rightfully so. The next sister is Ursula, and Ursula is blackmailed by John Paul when he finds out that she's having an affair. He switches the number of the boyfriend in her phone for his, and then from that contact, that where he's appearing to be her lover, he asks for a sexy pic. And then when she sends it, he reveals that like, hey, that wasn't actually your boyfriend. It was me. And now I'm blackmailing you. And Ursula is a nurse, which becomes relevant too. And then we have Becca, and Becca is the youngest sister. In some ways, she is the most free. Unlike Eva, she didn't have to grow up really fast in order to raise her sisters. She isn't in a relationship. She is child-free. However, we know that we see this development throughout the series and these flashbacks of these big dreams that she had to open her own massage studio. And we see how John Paul had shown her his support and offered her a loan. But then once she has already put her life savings down on that first portion of the lease, he then claims that she misunderstood what he meant when he said he would support her. And so now she is like left with less than she started with. She doesn't even have the studio, but she's already put in this like non-refundable deposit and has like lost her life savings. So, every single sister would have motivation to kill this guy. And yet there is this theme of that they're doing it for their other sister. Like nobody's doing it for their own revenge. They're like doing it to like save their sister, which is important. But what I'll say now is how the sisters worked together to try to kill him, because I don't know, there's something about this resistance of like they are fighting. Like it's a really great metaphor for activism, where it's just like, man, any battle you have, like patriarchy is a motherfucker, and if you're trying to abolish it, like it just will keep popping up, like you just cannot kill it or something. So the first murder attempt is Eva and BB working together to blow up their cabin, like his family's cabin, and they like buy a concert ticket for his wife and his daughter so that they can go and like actually like have a free time together to like move their bodies and listen to music and have this like big shared awe experience with all of Dublin. But sure enough, like the sisters time it out, like they figure it out perfectly, but he happens to be taking a piss at that exact moment, so he is not in the cabin when it blows up. And of course the sisters find out that there were some very treasured photo albums that were lost in the fire. So there's this extra like heartache where it's just like, oh my God, not only did they not kill the guy, which was the plan, but they've essentially like taken something from Grace. Like she's like lost some, like baby pictures of her daughter, and that's really sad. Then Ursula comes on board, and Ursula is a nurse. So it's really helpful that she can like kind of sneak certain chemicals, and she knows like kind of the metabolics of poison. So they decide to poison some liver, because John Paul is the only one in the family that eats liver. And I guess every Monday Grace cooks it for him. So they're like, we'll buy some liver, we'll poison it, we'll switch it with the liver that's in Ursula's fridge when we just, happen to be stopping by earlier that day. And it like absolutely works. Like they make it happen, but then Grace accidentally drops it on the floor. So the next day the sisters get a call that the dog died, because they can surmise that something must have happened where she ended up feeding the liver to the dog when the liver fell on the floor. Then we have a paintball incident that for John Paul's birthday, he wants to go paintballing. And so they're all like going to go do this paintball thing. BB, the one who lost an eye, is also was an archery champ. And they figure out that if she freezes the paintballs, they will be lethal if she shoots him in the soft spot of the skull, which is from the injury that he got from that car accident where he was recklessly driving. So this attempt does not succeed when she's trying to line up her shot and she's maybe getting cold feet, and Becca kind of nudges BB to encourage her, just do it. But that little nudge at that particular moment is right when she was about to pull the trigger, and she misfires and ends out taking the eye of the paintball instructor. So it's just this very poetic, very oh wow, she is literally she's literally now done the thing, the unforgivable thing that JP did to her. So there's just, oh man, so many she's feeling so much more guilt and shame over taking out this guy's eye as an accident when JP was, purposefully driving recklessly. Anyway. Oh, that was hard. They also try to drug him and make it look like he drowned in the bath. And that also fails and results in Eva becoming estranged from one of her really good friends and her coworkers, who was there at this, actually was the one that saved him from the, there's more to say, but then also saw that Eva was there and just knew that something was up and just was okay, you're not trustworthy and I can't be your friend anymore. So, and then the final one is, the youngest sister, Becca, is a massage therapist, and she ends up becoming really good friends. It's this beautiful, intergenerational friendship with JP's mom. And we also can see how JP is doing this elder abuse thing with his mom. I mean, he's he's a good enough son, and he gets her groceries for her every week, but he just absolutely treats her like trash and just says just really offensive things, just is not, anyway. So it's really nice that Becca kind of forms this friendship with JP's mom. And just without wasting too much more, emotional and mental capacity on details, I will just say that there's another attempt where they try to take JP's life, and it ends up being his mom that is killed. So it's wow, Becca ends up actually killing her friend, right? And how women get caught in the crossfire of trying to fight the patriarchy, and so I just really want to hold very tenderly that every fucking attempt that these sisters have ends up in some sacrifice from one of the other sisters, a huge emotional load or and literally harm, in the case of Minna. And anyway, so all right, I also just want to say, so he does end up dying, and we find that it's actually Grace who ends up killing him. And it seems really noteworthy that it was the thing that really motivated her to do it was the revelation that JP had raped Eva. That she was finally motivated to kill him for the same motivation, which is for what he has done to my sisters. That the sisters all are primarily motivated to kill because of the solidarity that they feel for someone else, that it's almost like, well, I can put up with this, like, but I am I love this other person, this other family member of mine, like almost more, than myself. Like, I don't want it for you. I can put up with whatever if that's what's needed, but I can't tolerate what he's done to this other person. Yeah, it just feels like that somehow resonant to me too, that it like is easier for me to be pissed off at like on my friends' behalf, and like they can sometimes access like rage or sadness for me in a way that sometimes is like harder for me to, and just like the necessity of numbing, I guess, in order to survive the patriarchy. But like how that capacity and motivation to get pissed and do something wakes up when we see that other women are going through it. And so I think that is part of my hope with taking some time to really sit with this season of Bad Sisters and be having these questions of like, what is it like to be combating the patriarchy in our lives and in our relationships, especially when we're in hetero relationships. I know Zonva Lines is going to be doing a podcast about like how even though her husband is great in so many ways, he still is a threat to her every single day, because every single day he could wake up and do something differently, and she is just like by virtue of being a hetero woman in the patriarchy would be at a disadvantage, and just the immense amount of trust that it takes for women to be living with a man when we know that 1 in 5 women have experienced domestic violence, right? When we know that statistically speaking, like the most dangerous place for a woman is her own home, because like women are killed by, their romantic partners by and large way more than any other like category of, some like random stranger or accidental. All right. So that is what I have for the recap, and I will now leave you with the content of the episode, which is, how patriarchy gets in the way of pleasure, and what are things that we can do to reclaim our pleasure and practice it as an act of resistance. I hope you enjoy. Hello, Marisa. Welcome to the Stoner Story Witch.
Yay. I'm so glad to be here. Being together on the Numinous Network and in facilitation training, the threads of community and making that happen organically is so exciting, and it's always right. And every time we talk, like you said, it's good.
Yeah. I always really like connecting with you. Yeah. So Marisa, you are here to talk specifically about pleasure. And what I am going to be doing is connecting it to the story that I feel is a really great companion to this question. And that is Bad Sisters Season 1, which was actually recommended to me by a friend of ours from the Numinous facilitation training. They had just mentioned it. And I was like, okay, like the next time I have like access to Apple, I will power watch it. And so it feels really sweet that like you're the person that kind of like came forth to discuss some of these themes with me. So I'm feeling really jazzed about that. And I want to, before we jump in, I want to ask you to just like introduce yourself and tell me, what identities do you lead with?
Thanks. Well, one just came to the forefront that might not normally think, but the Emerald Islands. I am half Irish, and I identify as that. I'm also half Sicilian. So these islands, so my lineage, and I have a small thread of blood from North Africa with that Sicilian connection. So those blood identities, and I very much identify as a woman, and the connection to my womb and the story of my womb and where it is. Queer, but have been on a very heteronormative, because it's an easier path almost, and yet stuck kind of in my queerness, and being a mother. right now of a mothering from a distance
Mm.
is a new identity. Mothering a girl, a woman, young woman. And I am white presenting, especially, but I don't like lead with it, but I really pay attention.
Right.
And yeah, yeah. Intermittently disabled. Sometimes I'm really disabled,
Mm.
and sometimes I'm perfectly fine. So this intermittent disabled, which I loved in that podcast where you said we'll all at some point be disabled.
Mm.
So in a way, it's an identity that we try to pretend we're not going to have, and yet
Right.
but it's come to my forefront.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that all of them, a witch,
Mm-hmm.
a witch, and as Carmen says, like outside, outside the gatekeeping, what does she call it? That we are
Oh,
um,
edgewalkers.
edge walkers.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely an edge walker.
Yes, I see you as one edgewalker for sure.
Yeah,
Fellow. We can
yeah,
smell our own.
yeah, yeah. In that, in the past, it's maybe felt like a weirdo.
Oh my God. I feel that in my chest. I just felt like a like
Like,
yeah, like a relief that you named that, and also like there's such a heaviness with like yeah,
yeah,
like the weird wound for sure, and then like kind of being like, but actually there's something really magical and witchy about being weird,
yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
And then there's this piece of like I don't make art anymore. I used to be an artist, but there's something about I was raised with art as the
Mm.
forefront, and I
Mm.
was an artist. So
Yeah.
so this something it's not the artist, but something about art is a flavor in there that's very powerful.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like that the connection of like the spiritual with like the creative, and art is being like your creative outlet for sure. Oh,
Yeah.
awesome. Oh, thank you so much. Um, all right, so um the beginning of every episode, I try to remember to ask my guests like the kind of the three questions that I feel the stoner story, which is really trying to sit in. Um, the first is how do you connect to your wildness? The
Mm.
second is what stories are guiding you on your path of liberation, which like we could say is today's episode is Bad Sisters, but I invite you to name another one if there's something else you'd like to just kind of name. And how do you resource yourself for collective liberation? And so I will start with the first one. uh, Marisa, how do you connect to your wildness?
Mm. Yeah. Um, Definitely moving, like just is it dancing, but moving, being in my body and listening to my body and let it move a certain way. Um, Through pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And I have sometimes literally used self-pleasuring as a way to open up creativity,
Mm-hmm.
intuition, magic, healing,
Mm-hmm.
and um and nature.
Mm-hmm.
And nature. And like just being in nature. And I live in New York City. But so it's there's a lot of torture around that I really connect to nature and then I'm not that close to it. And
Yeah.
then also being disabled, sometimes it's difficult to get there and that becomes really difficult.
Yeah.
But those are my sources
Nice.
for
All right.
wildness.
Yeah. And what stories are guiding you on your path of liberation?
Yeah, Bad Sisters was fun. Again, the Ireland piece.
Oh yeah,
Um,
you've mentioned that to me. Can you just say more about that officially on the podcast that you were like, I watched Bad Sisters like for Ireland and for humor. Like, do you just want to,
yeah,
yeah, like say a little bit about like, because you didn't watch it for me, you like watched it on your own, and yeah. So why don't you just explain a little
yeah.
bit of what you mean by that?
Yeah, sometimes I really want to connect to my roots,
Mm-hmm.
and I will specifically look for movies that are set in Ireland and
Mm-hmm.
just go there and be there and see those cliffs
Mm-hmm.
and the water pushing up against them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I have to do it sometimes, and
Yeah.
it so helps to go there. I think I do have big dreams of living there. Um, but I definitely want to visit again. I've been there once.
Yeah, it's a way of like kind of like spiritually like visiting a place by like being immersed in like a story that's taking place in that landscape. This is
Yeah.
kind of what I'm hearing you say. Oh, that's beautiful.
Definitely. Definitely.
And then how do you resource yourself for collective liberation? It's very similar to the wildness, but I feel like it's worth coming at it from two different
And
angles.
from this one for my own liberation, right?
Well, I would say like,
Well,
there is no collective liberation without
without.
individual liberation. So I think they're related for sure.
Again, pleasure,
Yeah.
like joy practices. And every time I see it, somebody talking about it, stay connected to joy when it's the hardest. And like being in joy is a resistance in itself.
Yes.
That we aren't that overwhelmed by having to live and make money, that we're still having fun with each other.
Right.
Uh, community, being in liberatory communities.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. I can't even speak. There's something to say about this right now that I'm just in this like loss for words. I guess which is probably, I went into this like zone that was kind of beyond words. So I think that's being in the realm of the imagination,
Mm.
being in what we don't yet know. We start to be on the edge of it, but trusting being on the edge of something, that we're looking towards something that we can't even quite see fully yet.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that delight of the imagination and possibility.
Yes. Tapping into like a collective imagination, like what could liberation look like? Yes.
Yeah. It could be
Oh,
this, but it's also even beyond that. Like
right.
we can't even from here in the midst of everything, can't quite yet see
Right.
it.
Right. Right. Yeah. I really love you speaking of pleasure being liberatory. Um, and it it reminds me, I was planning on mentioning this probably at some point in the episode, but I think now sounds as good a time as any. Like that after Brett Kavanaugh was not elected as Supreme Court Justice, I remember just feeling like such a hopelessness and like such a despair. But like I also knew that I was just like so uninterested in partnered sex. And because I was in a hetero, monogamous, still am relationship. And I just like, I got myself a really nice vibrator, and I like, it was like I was making the connection of how there is a certain population of people in the United States that do not want uh women and queer LGBT bodies to be experiencing pleasure. And I was just like, fuck that. Like, I'm going to
Yeah.
get a really nice vibrator and I am going to like be committed to this practice. And it was, and there was like a spiritual or magical component to it too, because I had this intentionality that wasn't around like shame. It was from a place of like, I am reclaiming something that people do not want me to have. And and then I would find myself, like you say, going into these like imaginal spaces um and I would just like be dreaming up like fantasy worlds, or I'd be processing like stories that I had been seeing or had been reading and thinking like, what do I want to offer my pleasure in service of, and like just kind of trusting that it's like it's there, I'm envisioning a more liberated ending to some story, and I am offering my like I'm offering this moment, this release, this as this act of resistance. And then I like kind of learned about like sex magic and whatever, and then it just felt kind of cool that it's anytime that it's like, oh, I kind of just like intuitively got into this practice that really got me through what felt like a really tumultuous time, and still fucking is, oh my god. And it feels really sweet to I my own personal background is very shame filled around just sex, period, and definitely self pleasure, which I think Bad Sisters certainly touches on. And so
Mhm.
there's something that even just feels liberatory about like having a very open conversation with you and putting it out there, um, that feels really meaningful. So I'm just so pumped you're here.
I love all of that. Can I respond? I want to.
Please do.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I mean, it's so funny that we did, and I think especially we call it a wand often. A vibrator is often called a magic
Mm.
wand.
Oh.
Like,
See,
let me
like
get my
I like
wand. That was an early name, I think.
I'm like getting chills.
Yeah,
Like I feel like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm still
yeah,
like such a like this like prudish I could get a different word, but like prudish like 17-year-old version of me is just like, oh, like I didn't know, like I have so much to learn still. Okay, so I
And you said
yes,
all
I
that though,
have a magic
and
wand. I have a magic wand.
yeah,
Say more, tell
and
me
there's this
more.
other piece about like there was this thing about witches would ride their brooms. Like their
Uh-huh.
brooms were like we're riding the stick. We're and that allowed them to fly. And
Right.
there is this whole piece there, very old research piece about even putting something on these that made them like was aphrodisiacal, and
Yeah.
these wands.
Or even had like, some psychedelic type quantity, like
Yeah,
putting like a psychedelic kind of salve on their like brooms and then
yeah,
putting it in between their legs and like literally like having a trip.
yeah, yeah.
And this like, pleasure in between their legs as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just them in this broom. The other piece, oh my gosh, the Brett Kavanaugh. Like,
Mm.
so I was doing this thing, I would do it once a month called Tantric Date, which I still sometimes have this night for couples, all couples, and exercises to connect. And one of the things we do too is we do a practice, a very simple practice to take our pleasure, take our love, and use it for the meditation of all beings. May all beings have pleasure. May all beings be supported in their pleasure and their love. And to do it in a group and so to manifest this pleasure together. And I was doing this workshop and it would pretty much sell out every month.
Mm.
And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then I had it the night of the Kavanaugh and no one came.
Mm.
No one signed up.
Oh.
And Venus was retrograde. And it was the first time I learned to pay attention to that. But that it sucked the life out of pleasure for so many people. Like
Yeah.
this thing that sold out, no one came. So what you were doing was like the perfect antidote to get a sex toy and find it within yourself. And that is the ultimate, to not have our pleasure be
Right.
dependent on someone else and to really own it in our own selves.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I want to talk a little bit about like the pleasure practices as I saw it, and certainly there are others that we can speak about. But um, in season one, we see I think fairly early on there's like this quick scene with Becca, who's the younger sister, and she's in her apartment turning up music and just like dancing, like this like embodied movement that just seems like just delightful and embodied, that she is absolutely just moving her body in a way that feels good to move and not necessarily like following some sort of, like choreography or what have you. Um, we also know that the husband of Grace, JP, John Paul, is just like such a metaphor for the patriarchy. And he just sporadically loves to just make terrible comments about Becca, about her being a bum, worthless, she's disappointing, she's a failure. She's not partnered and she has no children. And that, of course, just feels how, patriarchy loves judging women for their lack of partnership, mom status, and like the connection of what it is to like maybe there's a connection between the fact that Becca is not partnered and then therefore she still has the freedom to move about her apartment in like a really embodied, pleasurable, delightful way. Um, okay, so then that's just Becca, and then we see JP's wife Grace put herself out there in a dance class, and sadly like my heart broke when like her reason why was, I mean, my heart broke, and it also made so much sense to me, is that her daughter says to her, like, you're always home. You don't do anything for yourself. Like, do something for yourself. Um, and like that, as a parent of a child who identifies as female, I'm like, I can see how there is like what am I modeling to my kids that's like a really good motivating factor, or this like her daughter is raising her in this way almost. But anyway, Grace goes to a dance class, and at the start of the class they initiate a dance circle that's meant to be a really playful way for everyone to introduce themselves through movement. And it's very obvious that Grace is very uncomfortable, and she ends up just running out and not coming back. And of course, like that like evangelical Christian part of me like really like wants her, like I'm like, no, stay, like don't leave. Like I need you to stay. Um, but I want to just pause there actually, because there's a part of me, like as I was watching that, and we have done facilitator training with Carmen Spaniola, and you have been facilitating, embodied movement and pleasure things for decades now.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I saw that as like such a, we can forgive the facilitators of that dance circle. Like I'm not pointing fingers
I've
or
made
anything.
that mistake many times.
Right. Yeah. But it's like, okay, so like let's just name that, like that was, on this podcast, I talk a lot about secure attachment, and is being safe, seen, secure, and soothed. And soothed is, about like being able to attune, having emotional resonance. So like for a facilitator to recognize a new face and be curious, like, what is your experience with this
Yeah.
type of thing? Do you have any experience in dance? Or, like introduce yourself, or even anyway, I'm
Mhm.
already talking about my thoughts, but I'm curious, like when you saw that scene, like, you know, holding compassion for
Mhm.
whichever Marisas have
Yeah.
perhaps done similar acts of misattunement, but like, for any listeners out there who've maybe been Grace in that sort of situation, like what would a corrective experience have been, or what could that facilitator have done that might
Yeah.
have changed that experience for Grace?
Yeah. I mean, that whole segment, that what Grace was doing was so beautiful. Like her daughter pushed her, but she was starting to realize that that her husband was pulling it out of her, and
Yeah,
she was in this journey to try to reclaim her pleasure. And she
right.
went to the drawing class to reclaim art, pleasure,
Uh-huh.
embodiment. She was really key focused on doing something for herself
Right.
and for nobody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so she goes to that dance class. So one thing is this so important question of, hey everybody, why are you all here?
Right.
What do you want from this experience? To put that out in the room. So
Mm-hmm.
what a thing to have heard Grace say, I am so not in touch with my body, so I'm here to try to reclaim my body. Like, whoa, then you have some information.
Right.
I'm not, as opposed to I've been dancing for 20 years and this is my new form and dance keeps me alive, so I'm here to keep it moving. Like,
That's a
who,
very different, yeah.
yeah, why are you here? That question, to hear from each person their intention for being there. Where are you, when we arrive to a circle, and just how are you arriving?
Oh, I love that.
I'm
How are
arriving.
you?
Yeah, how are you arriving? I'm terrified.
Yeah.
I'm here and I'm have this little bit of courage that I brought myself to this really scary place. Like I'm here
Mm-hmm.
to know that. And obviously, as a facilitator, you'd be seeing that.
Mm-hmm. A skill,
And
yeah.
yeah, you'd be seeing, whoa, this person is terrified. And
Right.
finding a way to support them in that. I mean, it's so funny the way that
Jump
here we go.
in.
Hi everybody, jump in. Let's make a circle and jump in the middle and dance in front of everyone.
Right. Yeah, I remember like Carmen saying like, you need to give care and clarity, like care for the anxious attachers and clarity for the avoidant. And I'm not even trying to label what her attachment style is, but it's like there was no clarity. There was just like, we're doing this thing, we're just like jumping in. And and I was thinking too, there like, there could have even just been some uh like reminder of options and
Yeah,
choice.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you know what? Like, just being here is a profound practice. Just
yeah,
being around people dancing, whatever. Or, or maybe one of the facilitators could have like been like, I'm feeling kind of low energy. So I'm just gonna like keep it kind of small and just
yeah,
kind of, like just let
yeah,
her.
Have options. Yeah.
options and like normalizing that those options are,
Mhm.
okay or what.
Yeah. I use movement a lot, and as a way for me, it's my biggest way to embody myself is to move, but I'm very aware that that's not the case for everybody. So I'll often say, so we're going to do some movement. We're going to do some movement, and maybe this isn't doesn't feel great for you. Maybe movement is terrifying. So
Mhm.
take a moment and identify, what is it that makes you feel in your body? Is it riding a
Mhm.
horse? Is it doing sit-ups? Is it
Yeah.
exercising? Is it taking a walk? What makes you feel? And just say that and just identify that this may not be your choice. And you've made a choice to be here and you're here. I love when Carmen often says, coming here is already a thing.
Right.
Showing up is already a thing. That's it. But I love when we mirror, and that we talk about it a lot, like being seen.
Uh-huh.
So there's this beautiful way that we can make a movement and other people do our movement, and then we feel incredibly seen in this
Mm.
physicality. So there's one moment that Grace like does this cool move,
Mhm.
kind of throws one arm up and spins around. And
Uh-huh.
it's this little flash and it's almost like it could be scary,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, of course, like
Because she actually did it a little bit.
yeah, and it could be so frightening to like open the gates
Oh.
and feel the power and feel, whoa, what am I doing? That's so foreign. And it would have been so cool if the facilitator said, oh, do you see that move that Grace just did? How about we all pick up on that?
Yeah, that looked fun. I want to mirror Grace in this fun thing that she did.
And giving her a signature move and then she gets to see it in others. And
Yeah.
instead of seeing it from inside where she's not yet inside, it gives you an opportunity, if you can see it in the in the doubling position, and get yourself mirrored.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and actually that's such a great reminder too that like um, you know, that like sometimes safeness can actually be triggering.
Mhm.
And in this case it's like what if or activating, I guess, we can say. But
Yeah.
like in
Yeah.
this case, what I had never actually considered like that Grace left because she felt just enough embodiment, just enough connected to her wildness, just enough resourced for liberation. And like that being scary because it's like if you invite liberation in, like then it's going to work on you, and
Yeah.
it's like you're
Yeah.
and it's like it's gonna be like it's just a matter of time before then like then like more and more and more pleasure wants to come, right? And so
Mhm.
I um
Yeah. That's where, and we
yeah.
often say, take things in small bits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can we just rest in goodness for 2% more? Just that idea of resting in goodness. So instead of a full-on circle and you're dancing in the middle for 3 minutes, like,
Uh-huh.
could you do a move? Could you do a move that is how you feel right now, and have that, and then pause and like, so how was that?
Yeah.
How was that? And and again, what we always do, like, what's supporting you and holding you to do something more? Are you ready for something more? Do you want to sit the next one out? Or do
Mm-hmm.
you want to keep going? How's it feeling right now? And
Right.
that thing of doing a practice and then paying attention to what that practice showed you, grounding and supporting yourself for the next practice. But,
Mm-hmm.
again, this poor Grace has stepped into this dance class to find herself with a bunch of people, and nobody is saying, so what are you here for?
Right. Yeah, to actually like witness her, to actually see her, to actually kind of like create that kind of the community that you spoke of at the very beginning. For that is like just a group of people that are just your peers and are just in it, like holding it with you. And the invitation to kind of like offer out, why are you here? What is this in service of? Like it invites this like witchiness, this intention, this, like for the sake of what? Um, yeah.
I think also too, like, she has, because Grace, you can see her, it's really sweet. She's doing this she is connecting with her friend that's with her and someone else that she knows. You can see her making a couple of eye contacts.
Mm-hmm.
And so also to support that, like to find the one-on-one connection, the really being seen by one person, and let that sink in.
Yeah.
And then could you open up the field to take in more? Can you take
Right.
more? Actually, no, I can't. Okay, why don't you just stay and just have, we meet first. And this is Moreno from Psychodrama says, we always start with one other before we
Mm.
even go to the group. So first getting that secure attachment with one other person in the room, if it's the
Yeah.
facilitator or somebody, before you open up to the safety of the whole group or something. Yeah. I love in this in the Wheel of Consent training. I just went to one fairly recently this weekend, and we each exercise it would be presented. And
Mm-hmm.
here's the exercise, here's what we're about to do. And then the facilitator would say, so you can participate in this by doing the exercise. You can participate in this by laying in the corner and taking a nap. You can participate in this by going to the snack table and having a snack. You can
Mm-hmm.
participate by going and taking a walk and coming back when you want to. And she
Yeah.
would say that every single time.
Yep.
And then if you do make the choice to do the exercise, you have fully made that choice.
Right. All your other bodily needs are met, right? Yeah. And you
And
are well resourced.
yeah, you are in choice. Sometimes we're not even given that opportunity to continually make the choice to be here.
Yes. 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 Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
All right, you also mentioned Grace's art class, and I liked that too because that was kind of because, and I love that you named it even without me like queuing it up for you, like the connection of creativity, which I certainly dance is also creativity, but this like a different medium of a creative practice. And we see that this scene where they're taking a break and the model walks around, and this model had been a nude model, was walking around and notices Grace's drawing and makes some sort of comment around like, oh, like the lines are a little bit more uneven or something like that on like the more sensitive areas or the erogenous zones or whatever. And she kind of poses this question of like, are you comfortable in your own body? It's like the same thing of like, are you comfortable in your own body? And Grace's response is something like, oh, you'll have to ask my husband.
Yeah,
And the model's
indeed.
response is like, well, he has nothing to do with this. It's your
No.
body. And then she kind of explains to her sisters that like she has these needs, and John Paul, like he seems like he can masturbate just fine, but then he's like saying he can't get it up for great, like I don't know, it feels to me like he is like very intentionally withholding, so he's not meeting her needs sexually. Eva gives her a vibrator. There was something that deeply resonated in like this idea, and I mean, I think I know for me it was definitely my Christian upbringing. True love waits. Like you have to hold on to your purity, your virginity, and like you give it to a man. Like it is then your husband's. Like certainly, like the LGBT stuff, like was just like not even an option. Um, and and just like how there is still a part of me that even with my own, like my self pleasure practice, I like I treat it differently than I do if I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go paint, or I'm gonna go record a podcast. Like I don't just say like, oh hey, like I'm gonna go have a pleasure practice in the bedroom. Like please don't, I'm trying to get there. I think I've done that maybe once or twice of just like being like, hey, like I'm doing this thing and it doesn't even involve you. Like we can get you in on the calendar if you want later, but like right now I'm doing my own thing. Um, and yeah, like I think I just have to say, like, it kind of breaks my heart how much I did resonate with Grace in some
Yeah,
of these scenes. And
yeah,
I know I'm not alone being a person that feels like my my pleasure practice has to be at least in the audience of my partner or something like that. That there is, I don't like the word ownership, that like that a partner would
Yeah, but
own
it's
your
in there.
body, but I think maybe it is,
Yeah.
I don't know that I have a particular question. I don't know like how much this resonates with different clients that you have or practices, or we can just take a beat and just be like, yep, that's a thing.
Yeah. It's a huge thing. I mean,
Yeah.
layer after layer. I mean, you can, in Bad Sisters, you can constantly see JP squelching sensuality,
Yes.
squelching eroticism,
His daughter
squelching,
can't even have a bra because he like
right?
sexualizes the fact that, yeah, sometimes
Yeah,
that like 12-year-old girls would
yeah,
need a bra.
yeah.
Ugh.
And to make it celebratory that it's hers and she wants it. That early on too, there was the daughter is dancing with her aunt and they're having a blast, and she hears her father come in and immediately stops dancing. Right.
Uh-huh.
So she knows to contain it. Yeah, I mean, energy, sex, money, right? It's so amazing to think like when it was that a woman was allowed to have her own bank account. Like
Right.
she wasn't allowed to have her own energy. She wasn't allowed to have her own currency. And it's like you keep containing the sexuality as
Mm-hmm.
if it's gonna take over and make you so wild that you can't be contained.
Mm.
And no, I mean, you're not. But so yeah, there is this like, look at my hands just went like this, like, connecting, squelching, holding down. I mean, you said we don't want to say that your partner owns your sexuality, but there starts to be that. I've definitely heard a lot of men say, oh, if I trying to help them with erectile problems and like maybe they could work on self-pleasuring and kind of experiment with what's erogenous outside of erection. And they're like, well, if I do that, I won't have anything left when it comes time to actually do it. So that idea that of like a lack of abundance, that there's only so
Oh,
much, there's only so much.
there's only
So if
so much pleasure that this person can tap
yeah,
into, that like if I oh, that like if I like experiment with other erogenous zones,
I won't have
then
anything left for my husband. I won't have anything left for my wife. If I pleasure
oh,
outside this container that where I'm supposed to have pleasure, I actually won't have anything left. Like,
yeah,
how
that's
does
like
it ever work?
capitalism or
It's
something. That it's
totally
just like
capitalism.
that, yeah, and it probably says something about their relationship to like that their sex life is probably draining rather than fulfilling. Like it's a withdrawal and not a deposit in that like little pleasure bank that is your
Yeah.
body, I guess. I don't know.
And there is this wild thing about erectile tissue in a woman's body that, it has the actual tissue, like you can have an orgasm, it swells up, you have an orgasm, and it is replenishing of itself, whereas a man's erectile tissue actually does after the release, it goes away and takes some time.
And we're
So
using the
like,
shorthand of like women as people with uteruses
yeah,
and
yeah, I am using that absolutely
yeah.
right now. So like a vulva, clitoral body has the capacity to multiple orgasm over and
Right.
over and over again, whereas the penis body biologically does not have that capacity. There's a whole other way to experience orgasm in a male body. So we're going to keep it
Mm-hmm.
to the penis focused system.
Right. To think that, oh, you have a vulva, so like, because yeah, like a penis system would, there is a little bit of scarcity. Like there needs to be a little bit of regeneration from one orgasm to another. But that's not true with the vulva clitoral system, where there can be multiples, but we're going to pretend that they operate the same.
Yeah, yeah. And if we
Ah,
keep it in the heteronormative, we keep it based on the penis, it's a scarcity practice. If we turn it to the vulva body with like all these different multiple places that the erectile tissue is, it's this very expansive practice. If we open
Yeah.
up pleasure away from the genital to the whole body being an erogenous zone, we're just in this space of so much pleasure, and pleasure can be happening at any moment.
Yeah.
But we are in this, like, let's keep it to this other small system.
I also just want to say that like I noticed myself doing like some internalized patriarchy of even like as I was watching, like I found myself being like, no, Grace, like don't run out of that class. And then like after that art class, I don't know if we notice her doing that anymore, like going back to the art class. Um, but throughout the show, we see many scenes of Grace sitting at home, just kind of like waiting for her daughter to come home, waiting for her husband to come home. And she's watching TV and she's knitting. We actually see that like she was perhaps inspired to take this dance class because she was watching a show that had like dancers on it. I loved that Grace was the one that actually ended up killing JP.
Yeah.
That was as I was watching and I was like, man, like I love it. Like I love like the premise of all this, but like
I cheered. I was like, yes, it's her.
yes, the
She
fact that
does it.
she actually did it and it was like this moment of passion and I also think it's really interesting that it was like she was drawn to do it because like the sisters nobody ever actually wanted to kill him if it wasn't for the fact of what he was doing to their sisters, you know, nobody was like I'm killing him because of what he's doing to me. Like kind of like how we can like grin and bear the patriarchy when it's like happening to us, but then like when we see it happening to our best friend, like our best friend can't like open up a bank account or whatever, then like there's like a much higher rage. And this is my experience. And so I felt resonance in that. But what I fucking thought was so poetic, so we have to talk about it, is that she covers up like it's this crime of passion. She doesn't realize she's gonna strangle him, but she does. And she covers her tracks through a story and through her creative practice by a
Yeah.
movie that she watched where a guy's like scarf gets caught in the back wheel of their car and she's like sitting there watching like seeing like what like studying what it is as she's knitting like this extra long scarf and I was just like fucking right like
Yeah.
it is not my place to tell her that she needs to take this dance class. Maybe that dance class is the thing because to your point, like maybe all she fucking needed, maybe all she could actually tolerate at that moment was just that one little flourish with her arms that like okay sure the teacher could have you know like all the but like it didn't happen and it was still enough like it's still um and I don't know there was just a part of me that was just like yeah Kristen like don't fucking tell women what to do like and like practice in a story like Grace is a fictional character but like who am I to be like you should really do this dance class you should like connect in your body and it's like no, like, and like that's what the podcast is all about. Like, how our stories, like this movie resourced
Uh,
her for liberation, for being able to fucking kill the patriarchy and get away with it.
and it was it's really sweet too. I just remembered it's Isadora Duncan. The movie that she watches is
Oh, it's a
Isadora.
real movie?
Well, it's a real person.
Oh,
Isadora
okay.
Duncan. Isadora Duncan was an incredible modern dancer choreography. She opened up, she was really the first opening of modern dance, contemporary dance. And it was all about this freeness and this
Oh,
liberation of the body. And so there were all these flowing scarves. And she was quite a wild character that she lived outside the norm. She didn't marry, she had children outside of marriage. But then
I'm
she
like,
also had,
so many goosebumps.
yeah, she also had a very tortured life, like almost like punished for her wildness. And she had a scarf on, it got caught in a wheel of a car, and that's how she died. So she was watching this
Oh,
Isadora Duncan's life story, and then she got that idea of the scarf. Yeah. Yeah. And
oh,
yeah.
oh my
And
gosh,
it,
that's even more poetic than that.
yeah,
Like,
because it is a dancer, it is dance that actually saves her.
yeah.
even that one movement, however it was, like it was movement and dance. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, it was quite an artful thing she did when the way she covers him up and puts him on that bike and everything.
Yeah.
Um, there's a piece like I love knitting, but there's also this way, like any kind of craft and creativity is all good. There's no higher or lesser, but it
Hmm.
is interesting that she also does have quite a fantasy life, like right, that we catch her a couple of times in her sleep when she's in her own world. She's having these great fantasies, and she's often waking up in this like, she often waking up thinking of sex and dreaming sex, like in her own body.
Mm.
There's a lot of juice, but then
Hmm.
it gets taken away. So it's funny to see like the knitting is like a containment of the wildness, right? It's like
Mm.
making it smaller and contained, but then into this long scarf. But then
Right.
again, it is the thing that takes you out. So it's like, oh, if I let it go too wild, it's gonna kill me. Like that is something that we have in our culture. Like if you embrace
Hmm.
your full sensuality, your full sexuality, it's gonna make you so crazy that you won't be able to live in the normal world.
Yeah. Do you believe that?
No.
I
I
mean,
mean,
I feel
wow.
like if the normal world is capitalism,
Yeah. I mean, I
like,
do live on
oh,
the out. I do. I am an edge walker. Yes, in a way. Yes, yes.
yeah.
Like a lot of couples. I mean, one of the biggest problems is not leaving enough time for pleasure.
Yeah.
Like they work too freaking much.
And you like have to pay the bills, like in capitalism.
Yeah. Unless you decide to just not have all the toys, have less and live simpler and
Right. Community
decide
living. Yeah.
that you're not gonna do that. So maybe, yeah, you can't live in it. You can't work a 60-hour week.
Mm. Yeah. I guess I can't be assuming like who all your clients. I mean, I'm sure I know you have a diverse array of clientele, so that you could point to, not that we're pointing at anybody, but yeah, certainly there is a choice that is accessible to more people to be like, Carmen and Ruben talk about having like the small and delicious life. And it's like, okay, so like maybe I don't need to go out to eat as much or go on, if you're the type of person that has a lot of expendable income and you like have, like a nicer car, a nicer, you go on nice trips or something like that. But can you actually like be like, okay, do I want to like have a really lavish week-long vacation every Christmas? Or would it be better for me to like connect more intimately with my partner and like have pleasurable practices throughout my week? Um, what's going to actually be more resourcing for my liberation and the liberation of the collective? And I'm certainly not telling anybody what to do, but
Yeah.
um,
Is it
yeah,
working for you?
yeah,
Is
yeah.
it working? How's it going?
How's it going? Kind of embodying your body and the connection of pleasure. Those aren't necessarily the same thing, but they can be. And in what ways is, like an embodied movement practice or a pleasure practice, like in what ways has it been liberatory for you or seen it, in your clients or groups that you lead? Like if there are people who are listening to this and are like, what are they talking about? Like,
Yeah,
can we like provide more
yeah.
context for what we mean?
So we can experience sex, sensuality, pleasure through various channels. And so one is sensation. And that's one
Mm-hmm.
of the channels. And we kind of think like, oh, that's what it all is. It's all about sensation. So for me, I am somebody who really lives like in my body. That's how I do a lot of what I do. It's
Mm.
a big channel for me, is the sense channel
Mm-hmm.
and the experiencing in my body. And it, for some, and this whole thing is like we can experience in all these channels. There's also thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
It can be like we could just talk about something. We could, and you can, that's why you can like take and read a book and
Yeah.
it can be sexy. There's image.
Mm-hmm.
We can experience through image. It can be just like a play in our mind. It can be a story.
Mm-hmm.
This is where role play and like pretend, and that can be So which channel is your main channel? Meaning making. What does it connect to? What does it mean to you?
Mm.
How is that? That can get in the way too.
Mhm.
Any of these can also get in the way. If you're really in the sensation channel, but your body is in pain,
Yeah.
you have to figure out how to use the other channels. And then there's emotions,
Mm.
feeling,
Mm-hmm.
being in the swell of like suddenly in love and emotion, being any of the emotions. So we have all of these channels.
Mm-hmm.
So start to knowing what is your main channel, what is a channel you don't know at all that you could expand.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think is important. Like I think it's super great. Like you may want to like literally start to pay attention, like, oh, your fingers are on my shoulder
Mm-hmm.
and you're touching my shoulder, and let me see if I can be there rather than in my mind somewhere else. And
Right.
to open up that channel, that's where maybe some kind of movement practice that brings you into your body, because it is a huge channel if we're dealing with the body.
Mm-hmm.
But also, if it's a hard place for you to be, you don't have to go there that much. You could these other channels, right?
Uh,
So
can I
that's a
respond to
good
that a
lesson.
little bit?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because okay, I love that it's just like normalizing that it's like pleasure doesn't actually have to be embodied, right? Like it's like there can be a connection between like having like an embodied movement practice being, but that there it's like so much more vast and so much deeper than that. And um I know we talked about this a little bit when we were first just chatting, weeks ago, and I was just like, Marisa, like I'm loving these romantasies because I'm reading all these like romantasy books, and I think that thoughts are easier for me than sensations. And yet these women authors are writing these books and writing about these sensuous sexual experiences and are putting words to the sensations that like what it probably feels like for them when a partner is, doing these things, or when I don't know. And it's like my own mirror neurons would then feel that flutter, that
Yeah,
tight
yeah, yeah,
coiling in
yeah.
the abdomen, or like however it is that they're describing it. And so yeah, I think it's cool how it's like, the stories or the meaning making can create images and then can give us thoughts and then can like elicit that I guess it helps me make meaning as to why this um yeah, just like the technology behind romantasy and how like romantasy is like a really liberatory practice for so many all the genders.
Yeah.
And like Onyx Storm, I did episode 17 on Onyx Storm, and I'll probably be doing more episodes in the future because like it's having a fucking moment right now. It's like I think I just read that like it is one of the best-selling fiction books in the last 20 years or something like that, like since Harry Potter or something. And
Mhm.
I think it's like worthy to see why that is. And it's also noteworthy to see like there's so many people that hate on it as like a book, as like on the books, like that they're not, like they're not these like literary masterpieces or whatever. And I'm like, but that's not what this is for. Like this is like a gateway to accessing pleasure. It is like much needed pleasure that's arriving literally the day before Trump was inaugurated. I'm just like, there is so much to this story that's coming out, and to try to like shame people into thinking that like it's some tacky. I am shedding my own shame around
Yeah.
like what it is to be out and being like, oh my gosh, I'm loving these romantasy books,
Yeah.
because like it's because of
Yeah.
like that voice in my head, that's JP's voice. It's the fucking patriarchy that's being like, oh, that's like, like that's just garbage. That's like not actually like good writing. Like, oh, you read that? It's
Mhm.
like, oh yeah, well, like how who is that helping by
Yeah.
not
There's
reading it?
something to like just letting something be fun, or letting, and
Yes.
also letting it be easy. Why does it always have to be hard? Like, sure, there's like, I'm trying to read some things now that are hard science, those science fiction books. Or like it's just hard for me. And we're tired and we're overwhelmed and life is really hard. So back to if we want to be able to envision something beyond our imagination, we might need some ease. It might
Right.
help to make it ease. And yeah, and even like with some of the sexuality work, highly suggest that we do a lot of this work I've gained the most help from is to do it with clothing on and non-sexual touch and take all the stakes out of it. Just make it simpler. Sounds
Yes.
so good to like let things be easy, let them be simple. And
Yes.
then there's this possibility of a bigger imagination of access to something that we don't yet know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even mention this at the top because I did one of your courses. You did a casting
Yeah.
spells for sexual pleasure right
Yeah.
around the election, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
Yeah.
Very, very,
Because
again, very needed.
I wanted us to have some ease at a hard time.
Yes, yes, you're casting spells for pleasure and ease, and you talked a lot about the wheel of consent, and there's like this, we had like the consent. Well, there's more that we did, but I remember like learning about that, and that was kind of in conjunction with a partnered practice that I was trying to do with my partner, where it's like, can you just give me, like you said, some non-sexual touch that is just that we are just going to agree is like not related to any other expectation of it being anything other than just non-sexual touch. So whether that's like a little like tickling my back or a head massage or, just a foot massage, like I don't know, but I was like, can we have a practice where you're just doing that for 3 minutes? Because to your point, it's like I want to just invite in like the awareness of, okay, for 3 minutes I want to just focus on the sensation of what it is for someone to be like touching a part of my body that I like to be touched, and like that
Mhm.
extra thrill of it not being my fingernails and my scalp, like
Mhm.
it is different, like there's just
Yeah.
something different, like that little bit of surprise or whatever when somebody else is touching your body in a pleasurable way. And yeah, and it's long enough to have a neuroplastic event. It's long enough for me to be able to actually like settle in the safeness. And I think, you know, I'm sure this is lots of people can relate, but I know for me, I can get in my head and I can get stuck into like kind of like some emotional gunkiness when I'm trying to engage in a partnered sex activity that is just like, oh, I'm like stuck in my head. And I
Yeah.
think that what would really help me to tap into being able to tolerate pleasurable sensations with a partner is, like you said, practice when the stakes are low. Like
Yeah.
it's like,
And practice in a limited container.
yes, 3 minutes. I'm
All
not
those
even
things,
asking for 20.
all those things that we were talking about with the dance class. So it's 3 minutes. 2 minutes is the like neuroplastic moment. So you're doing it in a contained, and then you're pausing. And what did you notice? Oh my gosh, I noticed I'm all in my head. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, I noticed I'm not even receiving. I'm thinking about the fact that this is hard for me.
Yeah.
That like I never do this without thinking about me having to give back.
Mm-hmm.
When is it their turn? When is it my turn? So you're doing it, each of you also. That's the other piece, is you change roles. One person gives, one receives. They ask
Mm-hmm.
specifically for what they want.
Mm-hmm.
There's a moment where you check in and you say, how could this be any better? Am I doing it the way you want? And you give some qualities of how it is. How's that? You make it a totally corrective, and then it ends. And then you
Mm-hmm.
pause, you notice, and then you switch. And
Yeah.
I love one of the best things when I heard someone say, when they said, how could this be any better? And I think she said, can you make it so I don't know what the rhythm is going to be? Can you make an asymmetric, change the rhythm so it shifts?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Like, that's amazing to say that clearly what you want and how much that does matter
Yeah.
in doing that. And then how was it to give, to say how you wanted it? How was it to receive that?
Mm-hmm.
All those container pieces.
Yeah.
And you do it outside of you do it outside of the bedroom. You do it, in the
Oh,
living
totally.
room. You do it in a
I mean,
separate space.
I just do it with my kids. Like my
Yeah.
kids love they call them ticklebacks. They're like, Mom,
Mhm.
can you give me a tickleback? And yeah, and then they'll be, sometimes they'll be like, ooh, like I want it a little bit harder or slower or whatever. Or, like I'll like go up it and they'll be like, okay, like can you, like tell me where they want it? And I just it feels really really good for me to be a person that they can that they're just in a practice of people who love me want to touch me in a way that feels good, you know?
Yeah. And there, yeah, and all that, yeah, askings, the yes, the no, giving
Uh-huh.
them that space. I mean, yeah, so good.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, and when we talk about, secure attachment, we build secure attachment through contact nutrition, and one of them is safe touch, right? And it's not about the type of the type of touch it is, aside from the fact that it's like it is welcome, it's consensual, it feel, like it feels safe.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And then there's to really back it up, because people will like, okay, how do you want to touch me? And I'll do this in a room where people are partnering with people they don't know sometimes, and to say like, hey, don't just jump into the first thing that comes to your mind. Don't jump into the thing that you think that you want or the thing that you always want. Pause, look at the person in front of you, be in this moment. What do you want in this moment? And then there's this beautiful piece that we talk about in the Wheel of Consent, to notice it, to notice, oh, that's what I want, to trust it. Is that what I want, or is that what I want, or is that what I think I want? No, that is what I want, the trust. And then to honor it, to ask for that. Oh, like, oh, do I dare ask that I want somebody to like toss me from side to side? Or is that going to be too weird?
yeah.
And then you have the like, will you do this? And then you have that, and each one of those, to break down each one of
Mhm.
those. So
Yeah.
it's so beautiful. And going back into the small steps, and how is this? What are you noticing? What's happening in your body? What's happening?
Hmm.
You want to go to the next thing, or you want to take a break?
Yeah. Speaking of taking a break,
Yeah,
do you want to take a little break? Have a little bio break?
sure. Yeah, we can take
Yeah.
a break.
Feel really comfortable with you, and this feels like, I know that you're a therapeutic helper. And so I don't know, maybe there's a part of me that actually is like, I have a need for some witnessing from someone who
Yeah,
can just be like, yeah, that,
yeah,
aw, that sucks that happened that way. Because yeah, it's even though like I'm older and I want my thoughts to be different, I want my impulses to be different. Like this is there's still like residual gunk um
yeah,
around like my experience of what it is to like own pleasure. And I mean, I can just think back that, I mean, first off, when I learned about sex, like it was not explained at all that it was pleasurable. I did
right.
not know the word orgasm until years later. I the shorthand like sleeping with someone, like I thought it literally meant that like you slept with like the man's would
It
the man
is a
in
crazy
the
phrase.
would sleep with his penis in the woman's vagina, like that you'd fall asleep, and that
Why would he
wasn't.
say that? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, it is telling us to go unconscious. I hadn't even thought of that. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I slept with them. No, you're
No.
sleeping, you're unconscious. You want to be conscious. And unless you don't want to be. But yeah, it's a crazy
Yeah.
phrase. There's a lot of
Yeah.
crazy phrases. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I, and my very first orgasm was an accident. Like because
Mhm.
I didn't know what it was. Like I didn't even have a name for it. It was just like, wow, oh holy smokes, my body just did something incredible.
Yeah.
And I was just taking a bath and like we had a jacuzzi, like we had like one of those like spa
Mhm.
bathtubs, or like we had upgraded like one of our bathroom bathtubs, and it had jets in it. And I think I was maybe like sixth grade or something. And seventh grade maybe, and I was just like, ooh, like, you just like notice that like, oh, it feels kind of nice when the water like I wonder if like this would feel like, you just like, I was just playing, I was just like I was just like
Yeah.
playing around and like what feels good.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, and I mean, I did it a handful of times, and literally every time I got a UTI. Like I had to fucking like go to the
Ah,
doctor, like, and like,
that's wild. The UTI piece. Wow. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I guess like just water being like shoved up there, probably not
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Um, and and then I also remember, like, I mean, I was in church, like I went to youth
Mhm.
group, and like it
Mhm.
like our changing bodies, our hormonal beautiful body, like the peak curiosity of pleasure was like just not a thing that was talked about. And I remember, mentioning to, like a caring adult in my world, that like I was worried that I was having like kind of lumps in my breasts. And in hindsight, I guess it was like hormone, like just hormonal changes that like it can happen. But I also like knew that,
What are you doing touching your
like
breast?
exactly, I felt
Ooh.
scared to even like approach an adult to say like, I think there might be something wrong with my boobs, because I have to like admit that like I was touching an erogenous part of my body. And
Yeah.
the response was, like they assured me that it's okay for us to touch ourselves, if it's to make sure that we're healthy. And it
Ouch.
was just like implied that like, but
Don't do it
if
for
you were to touch
pleasure.
yourself to not just ensure that you're healthy, then that is this other thing. And we're not even going to say the word masturbation because that's scandalous. Like that word was not shared, but like it was heavy in the air. Um, and
Yeah.
I, all that to say, I am a parent of some kids who are not yet pre-puberty, but they certainly, will be. And I am, you are also a parent. I'm curious what your advice would be for how to discuss pleasure. I mean, I said like, like I do the ticklebacks with my kids, but if there's
Yeah.
any other like ways of just like practicing normalizing
Yeah.
pleasure with kids.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about kids and let's first talk about like voices, right? The voices and the language that is instilled in us and how it's ringing, and then we're hearing in real time voices. So I love the idea that we're never going to get eradicate these voices inside,
Right.
but can we make those voices smaller, and can we bring in new voices
Right.
that are not shaming? Can we bring in new models? So there's so much stuff around really investigating language, and we can do this with our children from the get-go. So the word masturbate,
Mm-hmm.
if we go to the Latin, it means to pollute with one's hands.
Oh,
It's horrible.
okay. Yeah. We don't use that then.
We don't use it. We say self-pleasure. It's like, and just to know that is like, whoa. The name for the nerve that goes from the brain to the genitals, it's called the pendula nerve, and I might be saying it wrong, which means shame.
Ouch.
Bam, we're just like coded in it. So,
Mm-hmm.
how about the genital nerve complex?
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a better name.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, we start to create different language. Even I loved the vagina monologues. Eve Ensler was a huge hero for me in my sexual awakening. But I hate that she called it the vagina monologues, because the
Yeah.
vagina isn't even like, it's like a canal of muscle. She
Mm.
didn't call it like but then it's complicated. Like, we're never taught our parts. So where does your pleasure come from, even in the genitals? I mean, the word vagina, so that you could go on and on. Most of the erectile tissue inside a vulva-vaginal body is named after some man that discovered it.
Right. The quote unquote discovered it.
Quote unquote discovered it. And it's named after them, the G-spot, which is this amazing, the female prostate, we might call it. There's movements to change these names, and they are being changed. So starting to use different language, So my daughter, at some point, she said vulva instead of vagina. Like, what's on the outside? What do you see? And my friends were like, let's teach them the right names of the pieces.
Right.
And there was like heads and confusion, and now my daughter's learning, new words. It's amazing, this whole bit, we're given this body, and we're not taught how to take care of it. So there's this piece that your urethra is very delicate. The urethra and leading up into the bladder, and it's right next to the vagina. So if you're going to bang, even shooting water, if you're going to send things into the vagina, banging against the urethra too early. So what the female prostate is, it's a bunch of erectile tissue. The way a penis we can see, it gets bigger, it gets erect, and it gets bigger. And so there's like a protective erectile tissue around the urethra, that when we reach a certain level of arousal, when we're like, yes, I'm aroused, I'm ready, then the urethra is protected from banging, from any kind of penetration that's going in too soon is potentially going to cause a UTI. To really wait that you're in a full state of arousal before anything is going in. And it's amazing, even a jet of water, anything. So that should be something we just teach kids with vulvas. Like, they have a urethra and a vagina. So here's the deal. Be careful. This is how you do it. How do you ride your bicycle? This is how you care for your system.
Right.
Teaching them. I was very lucky. Very early on, my mother said something about self-pleasuring, like, oh, sometimes people touch themselves between their legs and because it feels good. Just don't do it in public.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm there's such a big difference between what I experienced as a kid and normalizing that it feels good and it's a perfectly great thing to do, and that's a thing you should do it. That we do on our own.
Maybe there's the competent protective practice. So that's where, like, you're bringing in the new voices. Who is it? When I started my sexual journey, I had all these teachers. I had Sherry Winston, I had Eve Ensler, I had Mama Gina. So I had these other new voices that I could feel behind my back. So I wasn't alone, and I could try on this new language and that we're changing the dialogue. There's a really great book for kids. I meant to bring it out here. It's like Love, Sex, and Pleasure for Today's Teens, or something like that.
Okay.
I'll give it to you for the show notes. And I love it. She has this beautiful, beautiful chapter on flirting and how lovely flirting is. And that flirting is this exchange. Like, right now, you and I just started smiling. It's the energy. It's butterflies and bees on flowers. It's us loving puppies and babies. Like, it doesn't have to mean, again, like when we're into like meaning making, it doesn't mean I want to go to bed with you right now.
Right.
Like, I'm enjoying your energy and it's lighting up mine and we're lighting up together. Isn't this great? And we can just be in this, and that doesn't have to mean some outcome.
Right.
Beautiful chapter. So I think there is something to going back and re-sexual educating yourself and sitting with your younger selves.
Yes.
in psychodrama, I did a lot of that, like sitting, Carmen does that, like sitting with your younger selves
Mm-hmm.
and like, hey, little 12-year-old, we're going to sit here,
Oh, yeah.
read this really good book on sex that we didn't
Mhm.
get to read when it was your
That
age.
is honestly, so I think honestly, one of the reasons that I have the Stoner Story Witch podcast is like the effect of watching Encanto as an adult, like with my kid, like watching and reading books. Like there's such the world of like stories and information and like just like what we know that we are giving the kids now that's very different than what I had when I was younger. Um, is like so liberatory. It just feels so,
Yeah.
yes, like 100%. Like I will sit and watch a show with my kids and I'm
Yeah.
like, but where's the crack in the wall for my liberation here? Like, cause yeah, like my little like 9-year-old self didn't get to see this or didn't get to experience it this way. So
Yeah,
yeah.
bring them in, let them hear it, let them hear,
Yes. Yes.
and all the capacity. Like I still can't get over all the how we didn't have visible queerness when I was
Yeah.
in high school. Like I look back, I'm like, what?
Mhm.
And even in college, like my friend who became this huge queer personality writer on the radio, like we were in college in New York City and he was not out.
Mm.
No. So now it is shifting. We can be with them and like and feel the
Mm.
liberation and the openness. And we can also reach back,
Yeah. Go get
reach back.
them. Go get that part of you. That's like,
Yeah, like
I mean, when I know I throw around the word liberation a lot in the podcast, but like I use it. Rev Angel Kyoto Williams has like the 5 pillars of liberation, and there's this collective process that the part is like, she says, like, go get your people. And like what she means is like those parts of you that were not allowed liberation then, like, go get them and hold them in your care and like invite new voices on the bus, right? And I love
yeah,
what you said too, where it's like, as much as I may want to like kick out the voice on my bus that says, you
mm-hmm.
know, all these things that I don't want to agree with about pleasure, it's like there like I'm going to spend too much time resisting that which I don't want. And really what I just need to do is be like, okay, I'm going to have a conversation with Marisa because I want Marisa's voice to also be banging around in that bus and telling me that like I can experience pleasure in lots of different ways and that it's important to experience pleasure and that it's liberatory and all of those things, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah. In what ways have you seen pleasure being a liberatory practice, or are there like versions of yourself maybe that you want to like name or go get in some way here? Like it felt nice for me to kind of name
Mm,
that, like, okay, like this is some of the gunkiness, or like maybe how how those relationships with those parts of you have kind of shifted, or practices that you have, or we can skip ahead to a different question because maybe we've talked about this, but
yeah. I mean, there's so many things, which way to go. I mean, sorry, I'm dropping into some of the pain.
oh,
I actually was a model for my father, as a child. So my father, and he just passed. So my father drew me, as a child, about 11, 10, 11, 9, 10, 11.
mm,
I also, he had me model for drawing classes, nude, and really out. So, and all of it was like outside of my consent. I
oh,
literally used to, they say, oh, you used to pretend to have jumpy stomach because I would sit there and I didn't want to be there and I didn't want to be naked in front of these people. I didn't want to be doing this.
oh,
And I would like go, I have jumpy stomach. And I would jump up and down. Like my body was revolting. I didn't want to be there. So,
oh,
yeah, so it's interesting now. I really have a strong thing about when I want to be naked in front of people. And
yeah,
it's all this like, oh, liberation. I'll go hang out with people in the consent community and they're taking off their clothes before I want them to take off their clothes. I don't want to, I have a thing about nudity, but it's nice for me to just be like, I have a thing about nudity.
I have a thing.
I don't like, I'm very careful about when I choose to be nude.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually become almost as I drop into consent, because I used to, and then I would perform and was a performance artist, and I would often perform naked.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost had like a retroactive thing with myself to slow it way down. And that's a wonderful piece, to just slow down so that you can really feel your inner yes and your no. And I'm like, I have a really slow warm up to being naked and just letting myself have that process
Yeah.
of a slower warm up.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yikes. I'm just like still sitting with the whole like modeling nude for a bunch of people in an art class, like against your kids. And like that definitely speaks to, and I know this is a thing that you work on a lot, but like people's relationship to pleasure when they have been, you know, when there have been various lines of consent that have been crossed and, you know, yeah, in
yeah,
sexual abuse or just kind of like, you know, in this case, it's like coercion by, you know, a parent in an up power position who's like, hey, I need you to do this thing. And like, even, you know, yeah, yikes.
yeah. And then the parenting piece, so then it's quite healing. For
Mm-hmm.
me, it's incredibly healing and liberatory to watch my daughter and
Yes.
let her make her own choices and to do that process. So actually, like at home, I'm quite a nudie. I can be quite a nudie at home, or even with
Because
you know,
you're safe
family.
there.
Yeah, and you know,
Yeah.
and so but she's very modest, my daughter, and I'm like with friends in that kind of context. There's certain contexts that I would be very like take my clothes off. Um, but to really let her make her choices, like, mom, you can't, like, so to backtrack a little bit, in my home, we didn't have a lock on the bathroom door. We had
Mm.
one bathroom for all four of us. You could be in the bathtub, anyone would come in and use the toilet, vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother got to be at puberty and he put a lock on the door. He went to the hardware store and he
Got
put a
it.
lock.
Made it happen.
So my daughter, like very early on, was like, knock before you come in.
Mm-hmm.
No, you can't. No, I don't. And she was incredibly modest. And it was so wonderful to
Mm-hmm.
watch her be herself
Mm-hmm.
and totally leave room for that. And there were, even inside of me, I could feel the fight. Like, how dare you?
Oh,
When my brother put
yes.
the lock on the door, I was like, what? How dare you? And angered, like, why didn't I do that? Why? That's so
Why did
smart.
I?
And then so again, those voices are going to be present. Those voices of how dare you are going to be there, but then like not letting them go into the corner. Of course, that's not, and that voice was trying to stay in the tribe and not be unsafe and go by their
Mm-hmm.
rules. And now we have this new way of rules that you
Right.
get to choose. How wonderful. And you get to be you and have your ownness. And I get to support you in that and watch and marvel at it.
Yeah. 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 I love the like, I don't need to change, like, I don't need to like get over my nudity thing. I can just be like, I have a thing around nudity. And yeah, like just changing the relation, because I think that's definitely a thing where I can just be like, oh, like I need to like the program of like I am broken and I need to be fixed, right? Or like this thought that I have or this program that I'm running is glitchy and needs to, and it's like, okay, no, like yep, it's just there.
Yeah. And what does it look like to be sexually liberated? What is it?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, so it's like some teachers out there, I feel like, have this jump to what it's supposed to look like is you're ecstatically dancing and multiple orgasms and full body, all this stuff. And like, what is it for you? What's that? What is 2% more of liberation? And
Yeah.
pause and feel comfortable. So, what sex looks like, what pleasure looks like, is such a multitude experience.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And where is it right now? Where is my liberation right now? What am I? opening up to? Where is it conditioned? And how am I going to investigate that conditioning to my liberation? And those edges are going to be very different for everybody at every moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Okay, you
Yeah.
already have offered a practice to the listeners, but I didn't officially ask. Like, so in the event that you like had something prepared, is there any like practice that you want to just like name that like for listeners at home? Like, I mean, I just love the we could just even just repeat it, the whole like, okay, like what is like a little thing that's pleasurable, and just like after 2 minutes, like stop and check in, or, um, but yeah, if there was anything else that came to mind.
Yeah. I think that one we just started to say about like this little tiny edge,
Mm-hmm.
just and to explore a little tiny edge within your own comfort. I have this it could be anywhere and anything. Like I had a moment where like I could only orgasm if my legs were out straight. Really, I had to like be in some position and I have to like, hold on, I gotta shift and put my legs out straight.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so, I realized it was really fun to like, oh, let me see. Let me just, it's mindfulness. Let me just find this little edge and what's happening here. And then it was like this wild thing to realize I didn't have to have my legs straight.
Hmm.
And it took just sitting with it. So finding anything at all
Mm.
and just sitting with it and bringing in curiosity.
Right.
Just sit with whatever that edge is and just bringing in curiosity about what's going on there. And then you create some kind of space, some kind of freedom potentially. And that leads to like another sense of freedom.
Yeah.
And it might be like, oh, that's what you might want to keep it, but just curiosity,
Right.
pausing on something where like, this is how it's supposed to be, and this is how it is, and getting curious with that.
Mm. Mm.
I only like to, yeah, kiss like this. And
Mm.
like, oh, what is that about? Like,
Right.
oh, that's
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah. And I just hearing you even just say that is reminding me of like one of the things that I thought was really great about the wheel of or the consent game is it's this practice of like, okay, like of differentiating who is doing an action and who is it for. Like, okay, I
Yeah,
am
that's
touching
so
you
powerful.
for you and your pleasure versus I am touching you for my pleasure. And just even the sitting in the
Yeah,
question of that has really changed my partnered sex life, right? The sex that I have with my partner, because it's just
yeah,
like, okay, in this moment, this thing is happening.
yeah,
And there's just
yeah.
like, okay, like, is this for me or is this for my partner or maybe for both of us, or
Oh no,
but it's like, but that there's actually something really sexy um about the checking in, like, oh, like you like that,
yeah,
or like, oh, that feels good, or like, or and yeah, so I love
yeah.
that.
Who is it for? Who is it for is so powerful. Who's doing the action and who is it for are separate. So it's
Yes.
not like you're receiving it, so it's for you. No, maybe I'm touching you for my pleasure.
Right,
And then
right,
in
exactly.
what we call is take that whole process. So looking at the wheel of consent has the four quadrants of
Hmm.
touch. It
Oh.
doesn't have to be touch. So it's give and receive. Some people say serve and then take and allow.
Hmm.
And sitting in each quadrant. So it can be a big thing. Another thing is like to pause and say, this is for me.
Hmm.
And that can be a whole like, holy shit, what?
Yep.
This is for
Yeah.
me?
Right.
And
Right.
and then when you're like, oh, okay. it can be very profound to say, this is for you. Oh, right. It's for you. It wouldn't be the thing that I choose, but I really care about you, and I'm invested in I want you to be happy. And I'm actually perfectly happy with doing that, knowing it's for you. It doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
be my thing. I can
Right.
do it being your thing.
Right. Right.
And that can feel so different than you have to like this too.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's like, okay, but I also just like this other thing, and I will, and like that will be centered as well at at another time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing I just wanted to say, I wanted to follow up because in the casting spells, there's also just this is just a really nice practice that I think just like even with just, it doesn't even have to be a sexual partner, but the it's nice to want practice that we
Mhm.
did where it was
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
just like take I think it was like 3 to 5 minutes, and it was and like the container is just, you know, I want blank. It could just be like literally anything that comes to mind. It could be huge existential, like world
Yeah.
peace, and it could be, I want a cheeseburger with onion fry. And it's just
Yeah.
you take turns. I want this thing, and then the person just responds with, "It's good to want.
Good to want.
It's good to
And
want."
hearing that and
And
seeing, yeah.
and man, Marisa, like if that has not been a voice on my bus of just like that 5 minutes of just like us normalizing for each other. I was just in a breakout room with someone that a total stranger, just had been in this class with, and just going around and just sharing what we want, like being seen that I
Mhm.
want. Somebody is witnessing me that I want a thing. They're not even like trying to like meet it for me or like lament with me that like give me any sort of like
Mhm.
emotional resonance around, oh, that must be painful for you to not be able to get, oh, it's too bad that world peace isn't on the
Yeah.
table, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. But it's just like, oh, it's good to want. It's good to
Yeah.
want. It is
Yeah.
good to want. Like there
Yeah.
is, because yeah, like there is a shape on my bus that is like, oh, like there's something dangerous about wanting or
Yeah.
something. It's like, no,
Yeah.
it's good to want. It's good to
Yeah.
want. It's
Good to
good to
want.
name it. I'm here. It's good to want. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Practice that muscle and to really, and yeah, and you're with this other person. I find that process very fascinating
Yeah.
of being with somebody maybe I don't know in a breakout room and still being able to access that other person and myself in their presence. What do I want? And how that
Right.
might shift another time of day, another person in front of me, another situation.
Right.
What do
Right.
you, yeah. And to even know all of these things, like they're liberatory for us in our sensuality, but like that, who's it for? I was thinking I had this like big vision, of course, of politics and capitalism. That's huge to say whatever bill comes, who's it for? Who's this for?
Mm,
So who is this for?
right.
That's a great question in those moments. Is this really for everybody or is this for like the top
Yeah.
wealthy? Who is this
Yeah.
for?
Right. Right.
And
But
when is it for everybody? So then we're looking for that it's for everybody. When is it for everybody? That's okay. That's what we're looking for.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Great question to bring in a lot of times.
Yeah. All right. I think we'll be wrapping up here, but I want to make sure to leave some space for you to promote anything that you might be wanting to promote.
Uh,
Do you have
just
like a tantra
to,
class coming up?
well, things are happening. Well, Valentine's Day is around the corner. I don't know when this will be out, so it might
Oh,
be. I
true.
don't think it will be by then. I don't have a lot of vision. We're far ahead
Okay.
of myself. I am here, and
Mhm.
I'm always doing something. Um, oh, there was one little tiny thing I wanted to say. That's right. When we were talking about the dance class, and there's
Mm.
this magic. So just the Numinous Network. I am on the
Yes.
Numinous Network. So you can find
Yes.
me on the Numinous Network and I teach there. You can find me and I'm always doing something. But Carmen created this class called Soft Animals, and it's an
Mhm.
intuitive movement practice. And what's so interesting when we think back to that class with Grace is you dance, you do this movement. It's intuitive movement that you do with your camera off.
Mm-hmm.
So it's taking away the witness, and you're trying to find, how do I want to move? But you were completely taking out the performative bit
Mm-hmm.
of it, so that you're doing it to find your own body pleasure, your own movements to serve yourself, who
Yeah.
what is really for you. So yeah, I don't know what I'll be doing in a few weeks, because after
Yes.
Valentine's, there'll be something. I am going to create, yeah, I do know that in the next couple of months, I'll be creating a container um, that will be happening. So sometime be on the lookout on my
Okay.
website. And
I'll link to your Instagram and your
yeah.
website. And yes, thank you for mentioning the Numinous Network. You do the strength and mobility class
Yep.
like twice a month, and then the soft animals, which is based off the Mary Oliver poem, of
Yeah.
just like letting the soft animal of your body like love what it loves. And it's a move. It's an intuitive movement class, and I've done it a few times, but yeah, that's a great one. Thank you for plugging that.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on my show. This was so lovely.
Yeah. I'm gonna pause for a moment and imagine it being helpful and curious for people, and potentially helping and supporting people in their pleasure, listening to It's For Me,
Mm-hmm.
see what happens.
Yeah. Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. Thank you to Marisa and to the Numinous Network and all of the resources that we talked about. I will put in the show notes so you can check those out there. I am currently working on several different podcasts right now, but I do know that I have some other episodes planned for discussing bad sisters and this question of resisting the patriarchy in all these different ways, and how it relates to other stories, and definitely Zonvaline's work, which I'm just mentioning again here because yeah, it just feels like there's so much information and companioning that she offers in her podcast and in her Substack that is so much more than I could ever dream of being able to offer. And so if I can just connect someone who resonates with the themes of bad sisters and who just kind of wants help like making meaning of it all and locating ourselves in like these systems of like how patriarchy is like such a motherfucker in our interpersonal and in our interpersonal relationships and in our homes, I cannot recommend Zonvaline's work highly enough. So please do check that out as well. And thanks again to Marisa for coming on the show. Again, it's marisasullivanhealing.com. I will post it in the show notes as well as her Instagram. So yeah, I have some Onyx Storm and Bad Sisters episodes that I'm percolating on, as well as a series on the Dream Productions, which is the mockumentary series that Disney put out that's in between Inside Out 1 and Inside Out 2 that just feels really juicy that I'm developing. And also what I hope to be a really fun conversation with my tattoo artist and the kind of roles and rituals that tattoos can play in stories as well as in our lives. So yeah, I will just kind of leave that there. I'm excited about some of the podcasts that I've got coming up. I don't really know the order of what's coming, but that's sort of what the forecast is. So stay tuned if any of that sounds interesting. And I look forward to chatting at you another time. As always, I love hearing from you. So if you just have whatever thoughts or connections you have, resonance you might be feeling from any of the themes that I talk about in any of my podcasts, yeah, I would love to hear from you at stonerstorywitch@gmail.com. I want to thank Matt Shuby for the podcast art, my husband Kevin Carlo for all his help in the creation of the theme song for the podcast, and Anais Mitchell and John Williams for their inspiration of Hedwig's theme and Hadestown. And before I sign off, I would like to leave you with a quote from another one of my teachers, Rev. Angel Kyoto Williams, who says, "Love and justice are not two. Without interchange, there can be no outer change. And without collective change, no change matters."